What is up, everyone? Swillo here, and I'm back with part 3 of the Mewtwo guide. In this part, I'm going to cover a couple of things I didn't go over in the Field of Dual Phase guide, like grab and counterattacks. I also did leave out Side Strike in the Dual Phase guide, so I will go over Side Strike and talk about the Just Frame property of that. And I'll also talk about, as you can see, I'm at the select Pokemon screen right now, so I also want to talk about supports I recommend for this character. So here we are at the support screen. My bread and butter is Emolga Fennekin. Emolga is a really powerful support for his utility, the counter pierce, slowing your opponent down, and being a long range attack. This is probably the support I use the absolute most, and sometimes I will switch into Fennekin depending on how my opponent's playing and the matchup. Fennekin is a good get off me, but it can also be punished easily by certain Pokemon in certain situations, so you have to be really mindful of how you use Fennekin if you do choose to use it in a match. Another good set is Umbreon Espeon. You're going to mostly use Umbreon for the get off me. In certain matchups like Charizard, for instance, Umbreon is very valuable because Mewtwo doesn't get his burst as often as other characters, so he really needs that get off me option when facing powerful rock, paper, scissors characters like Charizard or Machamp or something. Victini is a pretty solid support. The all critical hits effect you get allows you to combat head to head with people who are in burst mode, because once they go into burst mode, your light attacks will they won't stagger them, so it makes it harder for you to fight them. With Victini on, it pretty much gives you kind of like a bootleg burst mode so that you can combat them head to head. Togekiss Rotom set. Togekiss is a very powerful support for the speed increase. The speed increase has so much utility on Mewtwo, especially in the field phase, where he can punish a lot of stuff almost full screen, and he can just kind of dance around your opponent, either trying to encourage them to push a button or just sneaking in like a grab or something. Togekiss is a super good support from Mewtwo. Krogunk Sylveon set, a really strong set overall for both Pokemon in this set. Sylveon's defense boost is very valuable, along with the health increase or health heal. It allows you to survive a good deal longer, especially if you can get it while you're in rage. Krogunk is a good zoning. It helps you for zoning out in certain matchups, or it's a good mix-up tool. So pretty solid support set. I'll go here with the Emolga, my bread and butter. Alright, so first I'm going to talk about grab. Mewtwo's grab is very important to his gameplay, especially in dual phase. I'll start with his field phase though. His field phase grab is pretty standard. You get 80 damage, and after the field phase grab, you're going to want to go into stuff like dash grab. A 6x meaty setup if you think your opponent's going to press buttons. If you want to do something less safe or more safe, you can just dash in for an 8Y, depending on how you think your opponent's going to react. And that's pretty much it as far as field phase grab. Now in dual phase, his grab is extremely strong. 120 damage into a hard knockdown, giving you a mix-up situation of your choice. And of course, if you get it next to the wall, you're going to get the wall splat for 150 damage grab, which is very, very powerful. Especially when you start to factor in things like rage and crits and all that, this grab is absolutely amazing. On top of that, Mewtwo's grab range is very strong. As you can see, almost a character away, he can grab, which doesn't seem like a lot, but compared to some other characters that can only grab if they're standing directly in front of you, and you also have to consider Mewtwo's stature. Mewtwo's much bigger than most Pokemon in this game, so when you look at a character like Pikachu, where he's got a very stubby arm grab range, and Mewtwo's grab range is incredible. It allows him to just kind of catch your opponent off guard in a lot of situations. On top of it being a 9-frame grab as well, so it's a fast grab with a long range. like I said, if you're away from the wall when you grab, you're going to get a nice hard knockdown situation where you can go into fire spin Oki and stuff like that. Otherwise, you're going to get the wall spot, and then you can just chase them and their attack into a mix-up. Next is counterattack. His counterattack is... The strengths of his counterattack is that it hits in front and behind him, so it can catch a lot of weird jump situations if your opponent's trying to cross you up, or if they just somehow end up behind you. It also comes out pretty fast as well once it's active. There are some characters that have really slow counterattacks, but his is pretty active. And on hit, you get a pretty solid combo set up into a hard knockdown. If you're near the wall, you can do something like 2Y to get a wall spot confirmed. Or if you're close to the wall but not right next to it, you can still get a wall splat into some kind of setup of choice. Mewtwo's main weakness with his counter is it can be high profile, jumped over, high profile attack very, very easily, meaning that you can't use it in neutral as much as other characters, because if your opponent sees it, really all they need to do is take to the air, and there's very little you can do about it. So his counterattack is mostly only good as a reaction tool, a punish tool. When you visually see your opponent do something that you know you can counter, that's when it becomes a strong option. But for the most part, it's a weaker counter in some ways compared to a lot of other characters, because if your opponent's very aware that it can be high profiled, they can build a lot of setups around that weakness that it has. But when you do land it, it's a very strong counter. You get a good confirm off of it. Okay, so next up let me talk about Side Strike. Side Strike is another counter move. It has like a different type of armor than counter armor, meaning that you can't grab it, you can't attack it. The only thing that can beat it is pierce moves. If you pay attention to Side Strike, it doesn't actually stagger until the very end. This is a weakness that can be heavily exploited by characters if they have certain setups, like Lucario for instance. So it's not a move that is like a surefire. Just because you see your opponent do something, it doesn't mean it's actually going to land in the long run if your opponent knows how to set up stuff around that weakness it has. If your opponent blocks it, it's extremely unsafe on block. They can normally get any kind of high damage punish they like, so that encourages you to not use it more than anything. It's really just a super hard read or kind of a hard mix-up that you're just going to throw out in those situations where you know your opponent just isn't expecting it. It can also be a decent anti-air because it hits kind of all around his body and it has a high hitbox. Timed right in some situations, it's actually a really solid anti-air. Now, his Side Strike has a special property to it, Just Frame property. This is just it normally. You're only going to get 73 damage, and you're going to use a lot of your synergy to do that. But if you time your button presses, you get almost double damage. A lot more damage off of it. The timing for that is, the first part is pretty much right here. At this point where his hand is at the peak and your opponent's being launched, that is your first Just Frame input where you will press A again. The next Just Frame input is right before the tail hits. So kind of right there, but I would say a little earlier than that is the next Just Frame input. So pretty much when his hand is at the peak, you're going for your first Just Frame. And I'm trying to pause it. I would say around here, like a little bit after this. It's just the animation is so fast. The main thing is that you have to press it before the tail hits. That's kind of the important thing. Either like before or right. It's just such a fast animation, but generally you're looking at pressing the button before the tail actually hits, but not too early. So it's kind of like right as the tail is about to hit. It's very hard to explain, but That's basically the timing of it. Right before the tail hits slash the very, very exact moment the tail is hitting. That's very important to learn so that you can get the most out of when you do use the move. Like I said, high level play, the move can be exploited very easily. So when you do land it, getting that extra damage is a big deal. Also, if you want to do some of Mewtwo's optimal high damage combos, it's very important to know how to do the Just Frame Side Strike because that move is involved in some of his highest damaging combos. So being able to do the Just Frames is the difference between having a very high damage combo or having a very mediocre combo. While it's something I wouldn't really prioritize since the meta has sort of shifted away from using Side Strike in combos and in general. Like I usually use Fire Punch a lot more than I would choose Side Strike in most situations, unless I was just looking for like a super high coverage move, YOLO type read. But in the few instances you are going to use Side Strike, you want to know how to use it well. Next, let me talk about some phase shift setups. First, we have homing attack. Homing attack into 6x is a meaty setup. By that, your opponent cannot counter, they cannot burst, they cannot do anything. 6x is very unsafe on block, as I mentioned in the dual phase guide, which makes it a gamble, but at the same time, it's a situation your opponent has to respect. This basically creates two types of mix-ups you can get off of homing attack. When you shift the phase with homing attack, you can do dash grab. If you think they're going to block expecting the 6x. If you think they're going to try to jump away expecting the grab, then you can go into 6x. So it's a very powerful 50-50, dash grab or dash or just 6x. While it's one you should watch out for at the same, I mean, use it at your choice, you know, if you really want to play that high risk game, go for it. And in some situation, it's definitely worth trying to play that high risk game, but it's a very high risk game. You know, you either get a really good reward out of it, or you're gonna get punished really hard out of it. So it's a really nice. I mean, it's a nice situation to have because your opponent always has to be conscious of this. Because of this, sometimes you can just switch the phase and chill because you know that they're probably gonna react to one of those high pressure situations, and that may allow you to get like a jump Y or an anti-air if they jump at you, or all kinds of stuff. So use it enough to condition your opponent to be afraid when you switch the phase, but don't use it so much that you're putting yourself, you're kind of putting your match success in the slot machine pretty much. You don't want to abuse those mix-ups. Okay, so Mewtwo's low stance has counter armor against low attacks. As you see, Mewtwo's counter hits low, so if I do my low stance, it blocks this. There's not a ton of use for this, but let's say if you're in the Mewtwo matchup and you think he's going to do something like 2Y, for instance, that can be low stance. Let me get him low stance. So yeah, you can low stance one of Mewtwo's best pokes and punish it hard. In the Pikachu matchup, you can just sit in low stance the whole time because his projectile, the Thunder Shock, his neutral A move, you can block that with low stance, which means that Pikachu has to approach you with something or he has to use very unsafe Thunder in the air. So in some situations, low stance is a really, really strong option. In other situations, it's kind of just there. His high stance builds synergy. It doesn't build synergy fast enough to be worth it though. You might as well use it in some situations, but it just doesn't build enough synergy to be worth it. Alright, so let me talk about... Alright, sorry guys. Okay, so synergy. Perma synergy burst. What am I looking for? Full. Okay, so Mewtwo's synergy burst does a couple of things. It changes his jump Y. The jump Y has his jump Y has kind of like a different hitbox. Instead of hitting all around his body, it just kind of hits in front of him now, which means you lose cross-up properties, or you can't get a cross-up like that, depending on the character and how you use it. It's stronger overall. It has like more hit stun and everything, but the hitbox change is in some ways not a good thing. Like, it allows you to do combos like that off of 2x a lot easier. And of course, his synergy burst attack, the command grab. It's insanely fast. It's 10 frames. 9 frames to the scene flash, and then 1 frame after that where it actually grabs. So you can punish a large amount of stuff with it. But if your opponent calls you out, it's very unsafe. They're going to get a very juicy punish. Normally when you get a knockdown on your opponent, you're going to be playing 2 types of mix-ups. You're going to be playing they want to jump out of your synergy burst setup, so they get caught by an Antia. So that's mix-up number 1 you're going to deal with, or that you're going to have, is catching them trying to jump out. And then of course, sometimes they're going to be like, yo, you're going to try to anti-air me, so they're just going to stand on the ground, and you get the synergy burst. It's really it's high stakes 50-50s. You know, you can choose to play it, or you can just choose to make your opponent afraid that you're going to play it. You know. So you kind of have that option. That's about it for his synergy burst mode. He just gets stronger, like typical boring burst mode properties. He doesn't change a lot. His field phase homing attack does get the multi-hit on the second part. If anybody played this game pre-patch, that was actually how it always was, but they nerfed it to a single hit, and now it only does this multi-hit on the second, on the kick part, when in synergy mode. It's not really like a big thing. It's just, I don't know. I guess they wanted to make it look like it was a significant buff, but it really isn't. His jump Y actually has more phase shift points. I don't know if you've noticed that phase shift I'm getting on this combo. Normally it wouldn't phase shift that early in normal mode. So his jump Y has a lot more phase shift points in burst mode, meaning that you kind of do have to alter your combos, and I might go over that at some point later, but I actually don't know the most optimal combos to use in synergy burst, because I almost never get synergy burst, let alone have the chance to land a combo. Your up X changes into a pretty strong move. If you're near the wall, you're going to get a wall splat that you can do a lot of stuff off of. As you see there, 2 of those do 244 damage. Pretty crazy. You can do something like that to get 310 damage. So this move is really strong if you can land it, but it's not easy to land. You could use it as like a meaty setup. Or you could even use it in a situation like that to get a knockdown. Well, I'm trying to see if this will combo. Nah, this will combo. It's a pretty good move actually. It's just, you know, you're not going to get a lot of synergy burst opportunities as Mewtwo, so it's going to be hard to incorporate stuff like that into your game. But it's definitely one of his stronger options. One of his stronger perks when he gets into synergy burst mode. That's pretty much it. So like I said in the dual phase guide, if you guys have any other questions or specifics you'd like me to talk about with this character, feel free to let me know. Thanks for watching. Peace.